Hello and welcome again, the Farm Traveler Podcast. I'm Trevor Williams. You probably know that already. Today on the podcast, we actually have our first chicken producer on the show. His name is Peter. He's from up north, Canada. And so we're going to learn today about chicken farming, what he does, the whole process of it, and kind of some big misinformation that there's out there about chicken production. Things like free-range chickens, antibiotics, growth hormones, stuff like that. I mean, when you think about free-range chickens, you probably think chickens out in the field, like that girl on the meme that's like, look at all those chickens. But anyway, you think there's like a ton out in the field. That's not really how it is. Because if you had a bunch of chickens out in nature, roaming, being free, they would be eaten by predators, by like wolves, eagles, everything. So that's not really how it's done. And Peter is going to explain why and how they can technically be free range. And maybe it involves like a cool little neon sign or not. So yeah, this was a great conversation with Peter. He does a lot of great stuff on Instagram, documenting what he does. If you're on Instagram, follow him. If you're watching this video on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, all of the links for everything for the entire episode, for Pete's Instagram handles and all that, that will be in the description of this video. So be sure to check it out. Had a lot of fun talking with him. And if you've ever seen any of his content, he's got these really cool shades that kind of flip up. You might have to get a pair of those. I think they're super neat. So anyway, check out this quick little clip from our interview where we're talking about kind of some misinformation and also how exactly Pete gives vaccines to chickens. It's kind of a very interesting way, something maybe you haven't heard before. Something called intraocular. So you'll learn a thing or two about that in this episode. So enjoy this episode. It's episode 124. Thanks for listening. And again, everything I mentioned will be in the description of this video. Okay, thanks, and enjoy the clip, whichever way it kind of goes. Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah, that growth hormone thing, anytime I go shopping, I always like to check out the labels. And anything of chicken, whether it's cooked or raw, and you take home and cook it, obviously, it says, oh, raised without antibiotics. And in very small font on the package, it says, use of antibiotics has been illegal since the 1960s in the U.S. I'm like, yeah, so every chicken you have is going to be growth hormone free. Like, come on now. But yeah, I mean, it's just all about that marketing, making the chickens look better than they are, when in reality, all the chickens are going to be the same.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's also kind of the benefit of the quota system that we have. So what we have is each province has a committee or a board of directors that kind of monitors the eggs and the meat birds in their province, and then they all respond to a federal board or committee that takes care of just the same thing, but for the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And so across Canada, we have the exact same standards of raise and health for the birds and conditions in the barn as any other province. So across the board, we all have to meet up to the same criteria, and that way they can control a little bit how it's marketed, but also just to make sure that that quality assessment is there, that no chicken or no egg is technically better than the next.
Right,
so even
I like
if
that.
you were to go to the store and buy,
no, you're good. Go ahead.
So if you were to go to the store and buy like a flat of eggs that came from a free range farm and a flat of eggs that came from a conventional cage farm, the standards of living and the code of practice and the paperwork and everything that went into those chickens is like exactly the same. The only difference at that point is how the chicken lived its life in the barn. So we can at least get rid of some of these fear or some of this misinformation regarding at least living conditions. And then it just boils down to what people want to support, right? So that is a nice thing about the quota system. It does leave it opening a little bit more to marketing at like the grading station for the eggs or something like that. But as far as what leaves these farms, they're all identical across the board.
I like that. So talking about free range, whenever a person removed from agriculture, whenever they think about free range, they probably are just thinking about chickens in the field, running around, living life. But I mean, it's probably not what's going to happen. So what exactly does kind of your ideal free range chicken farm look like?
So to be a free range chicken farm, all that needs to be done to meet that requirement is that the chicken has the choice to either leave the barn or to stay in the barn. So at a free range egg facility or pullet facility, what they will do is they'll have doors cut into the side of the barn that automatically open and close at certain times of the day. That way the chicken can choose to go outside, and there'll be like a nice big fenced off area, try to keep some predators out and everything like that. But what it boils down to is it just gives the hen that choice, and 9 times out of 10, the hen decides to stay in the barn.
It's too hot outside. I'm gonna stay in the barn.
Exactly. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Like up here in Alberta, it gets very, very cold in the wintertime. So no chicken's going to choose to go outside, right? But they still have to be given the choice to be allowed to be outside if they want. So they're going to stay inside where their food and their water is. The barns are set up with nice places for them to roost and to perch, and there's nice little nesting boxes for them to go and sit in. Like it's not like it's a camp or a prison or anything inside. Like it is a nice facility. That's basically all that needs to be done for free range. But free range does bring its own issues into the raising of those chickens, or even the management of those chickens. You have to worry about disease a lot more, predators, of course. You got to worry about the chickens crowding themselves. So like if there's a thunderstorm, for example, or a big windstorm, if there's any sort of like loud, sudden noise, the chickens could spook and they could all kind of huddle in a corner, and that can cause all sorts of problems from suffocation to overheating. So it's not like it's heaven on earth for these chickens to live in free range either. It just has its own benefits and its own cons, just like anything else.
Now, are there any like stipulations to where maybe you get like a neon sign over the little door? You're like, hey, chickens, go outside, go have some fun. Are there any kind of government stipulations there?
No, I think the only stipulation they have to have is they just have to have a nice, paved, easy to maintain road to get in and out of the door. No, it's more just I believe the door has to open. I believe like kind of in the morning when the sun comes up, and then it's supposed to close at night when the sun goes down. So it's just basically a dawn till dusk. They get that choice to be inside or outside, and ultimately it's up to the hen at that point.
That's awesome. So she's got the choice: go out, walk around, stay with the other girls.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've been covering on your Instagram, I'm checking it out right now. You've been covering a lot lately, kind of like the vaccines and stuff you give your chickens. And I mean, of course, with COVID, there's been a lot of debate on the comments about vaccines and stuff. And so how important, I mean, are the vaccines and are the medicines that you give to your chickens? And also, I mean, how do you do it? Because you're giving it to like hundreds and hundreds of birds. I mean, what's that process like?
Yeah, so first off, the vaccine schedule or the vaccine program that we follow is very, very important. Because when you get these chickens into large flocks, like what we deal with in our barn, as well as what the egg layer is going to worry about in their barn, we're talking thousands and thousands of birds in a tight space. It's much like people in a city, right? So what we're worried about is just some birds getting infected with a virus that maybe was in the barn to start with, or that maybe got brought in by mistake. And we're worried about that virus spreading throughout the flock. So one of the key ones that we vaccinate against is called Newcastle disease and infectious bronchitis virus, which we can get bronchitis. It's very similar to respiratory illness for us as well as for chickens. And it's highly contagious. And same with Newcastle disease. And they both kind of attack the respiratory system and then the central nervous system of the bird. And it just causes a lot of discomfort and everything for the hen, all the way up to mortality. It can cause paralysis, all sorts of stuff. But then also it can decrease egg production, which ultimately is what we want from these chickens, is the eggs. So it's kind of a double whammy in that regard. So that's something we vaccinate against. We also vaccinate against, it's called AE, avian something. It's a big Latin word, about 26 letters long. And it's also called the tremor virus. And that one attacks the central nervous system, and it causes, it looks like Parkinson's, basically. It's a lot of shaking, some paralysis, and just eventual death. And it's also highly contagious. So these are just things that we vaccinate against for the welfare of the animal, and then also for the production value of that chicken, because we're trying to meet an egg demand, right? So we can't be losing eggs in the system. So these are things that we're worried about, and it's just the same thing. So a lot of these barns, they have to follow a strict cleaning program. So there's very rarely is there any sort of bacteria left in the barn after a flock leaves. It's more the biosecurity issue of if somebody wasn't following protocol and entered a barn and maybe brought in a virus with them and introduced it to that facility. So we're just trying to cover our bases and just go from there.